So the inevitable did happen, and that is I did a 562, and the case halves weren't quite matched. And so when I did my vacuum test on it, I realized that I was not getting a good seal. So, of course, I can't send that out to a customer like that. So we're going to have to go to the next step. And I guess I have to add an operation into my modifications. And it goes along the lines of this. It's a pain in my neck. But I'm actually going to trim the bottom of the cylinder and put the standard gasket back on by taking 20 thousandths off the cylinder. But in order to do that, it's not as simple as you'd like. And partly because you got to trim that flange and this flange. And there really isn't that much room to play with. Because if you think about it, look at that right there. I mean, I've only got 50 thousandths to play with before you start getting into the cap. Now, I know that this is how a lot of guys do it, but this is one of the reasons why I wasn't a fan of doing this to begin with. So to make an arbor for the 562 cylinders is I took some 2-inch bar stock and I turned it down to a slip fit inside those cylinders. Basically what I did was I roughed it out with one tool, then I used this round nose tool to get a nice surface finish on my final pass. So this is the cylinder I'm using for a test case, and it is a slip fit. You know, and if I get this right, I mean, it turns, if I get this right, I'll actually true the base of the cylinder up to the bore, because that is truly a slip fit. Now what I'm going to do on the tailstock is get something I can push into the cylinder, and just with a little pressure it'll be enough traction, because the depth of cut I'm going to do on this is really, really small. You know. So basically what I have here is I took a block of plastic, and actually it's Teflon, and then I'm just going to put it on my tailstock, cinch that up a little bit so it won't push back, and then I'm just going to give it a little bit of pressure. Not much, because I don't want to flex the cylinder relative to that arbor, and then just see what it does. And really all that is going to give a little bit of pressure on the inside of the cylinder of its switch band onto that piece of aluminum that has enough traction to drive the cylinder when I do my cuts. And that's pretty safe. Okay, I had to do a bunch of gymnastics to get the tooling where I can get the chuck to clear when it's all the way in, and the cylinder to clear here when that tool is all the way in as well. And I need some better tooling, but this will do what I need to do now. And then what I did was I set the tool against the base of the cylinder and got my 0. I backed it out. I got to measure the gasket. Whatever the thickness of the gasket is, that's how far I'm going to go out from the base. If it's 30 thousandths, I'm going to take 30. The other problem I have is right there. There's not much room to take the flange. You know? Actually, I've got to go almost 30 thousandths to replicate pulling that gasket out of there. But I'm going to use the feed rate to feed in, and then usually I like to start from the inside and work my way out, but I've got to be really careful so I can stop the feed right when it gets to this section of the flange right there. I don't know if that makes any sense. Yeah, I've got to let it feed in and stop when it gets to the flange there. All right, test case, see if it works. And then we'll look at the surface finish. My dogs are barking, but... So I brought it back 29 thousandths on this one. I'm gonna make a cut and see what it does. You know, I got pretty much what I'm looking for. There's the arbor. There's my button. And I measured on the ear 320. I ended up close to 290, so that's close to 30 thousandths. And there's the surface finish right there. I had to go a little bit into the flange. Well, guys, what do you think? By doing it this way and sealing up the caps, I think this is a strategy that actually can work. So let's review. When I measured the flange before I did the cutting, I was at 320. And then what I want to do at the end is I want to be at 320. I want to be at the same point with the gasket in there. Well, if I push, I'm 315, so I'm off by 5 thousandths. So I went a little too far. So I have to modify my technique just a little bit. But so I tend to do 10 thousandths more pop-up, that's all. So what I'll do with this darn thing is, this is kind of like I said, an experiment, is I want to make sure that this doesn't hit the case. I have a set of cases in the house to test that with. And, you know, then I'll assemble it on a saw. I mean, this cylinder's okay. And then what I'll do is measure the squish, do the pop-up based on what I see from there. So each saw has to be done individually. I guess I have to be a little bit more careful on how I measure how much to cut. I was off 5 thousandths. That's too much. So, a learning process. So I used this setup right here to trim that flange, and that allowed me to get in there without interfering with the chuck or interfering with the cylinder. Just touched into that a little bit. It's not hurt nothing. What I did was I set a piece of plastic on the inside of the cylinder so it stepped it out some. And it got enough traction to go. So I broke the edges with this wheel, and I used this die grinder to cut back right there. Cut that back about 40 thousandths actually. Broke the edge with the abrasive wheel. I set that back on, and I'll tell you what, it settled right down. I just got a little bit to work on here, on the, you know, right there, and conversely on the other side, right there. It'll be fine. You know that? So, these are the tools I came to put together to do the two operations. By the way, I got this at Tractor Supply. It's junk. Look how much slop there is in there. You can't do any precision work with it at all because that thing just moves around too much. This one here does stay pretty stable. I like it better. I see maybe I can adjust the slop on the bearings on that, but I don't like that tool. But there it is. I'm going to put that on a saw. My conclusion is No, you can't do simple mods on that saw. Maybe a muffler mod is about all you can do. You get into this here, obviously you need a lathe, but not just a lathe, you have to have some skills. So, all right, I think that one is going to be next. I got this at Harbor Freight. It was on sale for like 300 bucks. And what I've been doing is starting to organize my parts. Use this for parts instead of tools. So I don't have to go hunting for stuff all the time. Put my carb kits in here and my carburetors down in here, the new ones. You know, I try to keep stuff around. Pistons, got a new top end for a 450 right there. 346 top ends, a 372. Old stuff. But hopefully this will save me some time. Well, I kind of accomplished my goal, but my camera wasn't charged, so I couldn't really get a good video of it. But I want to discuss this just a little bit anyway. I snapped some pictures with my my phone. Got to organize this desk a little bit before I get into this. I think organization means push as far as you can until things fall off. Now, what this is I've decked this cylinder by 30 thousandths. And I pretty much hit it dead on. First time. But there's some issues that I've got to resolve before you can really put these together on a saw. Here's a set of new cases. If you notice, when it goes down, it actually doesn't seat. And the reason is, I've got to cut this back the same 30 thousandths, cut the flange, and I also have to bring that back up with a die grinder. So, and the other thing is, and I've mentioned this before, right here, these cap screws will actually hit the case and not let it go down in there. So I've got to do two things. I both have to trim a little bit off the flange, and then I also have to remove a little bit of material right here and right here, so that cylinder can actually settle down in here so these don't interfere with the case. You know? I think what I want to do here is I'm actually going to pull these cases completely apart so we can see how much they actually interfere. Get an idea. Now this is the 6 screw set of cases. These are brand new. I bought these a little while back. Just pull them apart and we can start looking really closely at what the interference is. Now these cases, Husqvarna is selling them for you know, cheap. The dealers get them for under $100, and which means they can sell them for somewhere around 125, 150, depending on how much markup they have to have. So when you get an older 562xp, it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever if it's a 5-screw set of cases and it has bad bearings. It makes no sense not to get the new set of cases for an extra, what, $50 more, $60 more. You get bearings and seals already installed, plus all the screws, plus an additional screw right here, you know. Now I've been doing 1194 builds reasonably successfully, and I ran into one that didn't seal, and I'm going to tear it apart and look. But when I was putting it together, and I knew this could be an issue, this is just another aside, the actual case halves on that saw there was about a 4,000 step, and it kind of made me nervous. And the funny thing is, all my nervousness missed the point, because where it actually failed to seal was not my base gasket concept at all. It actually failed on the transfer cap, and kind of caught me by surprise. I'm coming to the conclusion that modifying these 562s is really not something that really fits into my video series. I think I'm going to show you this because it's of interest, but I don't recommend anyone do this unless they actually have some skills. And the reason is, these saws are fairly sophisticated, and they were designed, and there just isn't a lot of room for these modifications. Dropping that cylinder, the flange, and all that stuff, they were designed to be one configuration, and just at 30,000ths, you start having other issues, interference issues. And see, that's the age of CAD CAM. Gives you that, because they can do solid models and design these things and do interference checks and all that stuff that they couldn't do in days past. And what you get out of that is a blessing and a curse. You get saws like this, you know, where everything is so tight. You get weight savings, you get the ability of doing more complex shapes. Actually, the complexity of the shapes is actually defined by the capability of the CAD system, but that's another whole story. And I doubt very much that any one of you guys wants me to go into the theory of CAD CAM. If you do, tell me, and I will, because that was my original stock and trade. But if you look, that actually interferes right there and right there. So I do have to trim the flange back. Boy, I don't know if that's going to come out. Let me see if I can reorient it and maybe put some screws in it or something. Yeah, so you can see it's stepped up. It's not going to actually hit. So I've got to trim the flange, and you can see how much of a gap there is. But you're not going to make that up. And my problem with that is I took 30,000ths out, and I've got almost a 40,000ths hit. If I put the gasket in, let's try that. See, it still interferes. It also interferes down there. So, I mean, there's just no way around it. You've got to trim. If you're going to drop that cylinder, you also have to trim the flange. Just no way around it. I don't know if the camera's picking that up. That's actually, I'm going to give you an eyeball, about a 10,000ths interference. So for me to build this saw with this cylinder, I have to both take another few thousandths off this flange, and I also have to remove material right in here and right in here with a die grinder or whatever you're going to use in order to let that cylinder actually seat. So that's a set of considerations. I guess I have articulated that in my prior video, but I don't think I ever did a really good job of showing it. But you know, another way of looking at it is simply this. Just going to rough it out. So that is, I don't know, let's call it a 1/2 inch. That's exactly a 1/2 inch. So there is no room. You know, I did a couple of my early ones where I did the no base gasket, but I didn't trim the cylinder. And I got away with it because it actually probably just sat right on there. But from this point on, I'm going to be trimming this just a little bit. All right, the next thing is, and I'm wrestling with this, is that right there. How much difference does it make if I trim that or not? And actually, you see right there? What that does is that actually defines how much of an opening you have into the transfers. Now, it's my belief that, I don't know if you're seeing that area. It's still got chips in there. I should probably blow it away. I just pulled this thing off the lathe, by the way. But I'm thinking that a good modification is raising this just a little bit too. You know? So those are just things to think about for those guys who want to tackle these saws. I'm going to say here on video that I don't recommend you guys doing this unless you've got some machine shop background. I really don't. This is not a casual build. This is a rather sophisticated build. Number one, it takes some rather sophisticated tooling, and that is against the theme of my entire channel about simple tools and simple changes to increase the performance. You can't do that on a 562. You just simply can't. The idea of just doing a base gasket delete like you can on 372s and the older Husqvarnas, you really just can't do that. The saw was built and the shapes are too close together, and there's too many things that can interfere that creates a leak and not let the thing seal up. So at this point in time, my recommendation is don't do it unless you got a machine shop, you got some skills, you don't mind going through the development curve I have where you ruin a cylinder here and there in order to get it right. There's a bunch of builders out there. You know, I'm not really in the business of doing that. I do my own hobby saws, but there are a bunch of guys out there who do this. And the second thing I'm going to say, if you want to build these 562s, you better pick the guy carefully, because what'll happen, because of the way the setup is to do this right, you know, I can screw around for a couple of hours and get things right where I want because I'm not on the clock. You know what I'm saying? But a guy who's actually got a shop and he's on the clock, you cannot rush your way through this. This is not a build that a person can just crash your way through production style. You sort of have to do each saw individually, and you got to be damn careful. Okay. You know, I built my tooling. I built the fixture for the asymmetric piston. I mean, geez, that alone for the pop-up, that's more than you're going to do with your typical tools from Lowe's. You know, I was going to get kind of funny here, where just to tease some of the more sophisticated guys, I was going to get a wood lathe and set it up where I can trim those pistons, because you can. And then I realized that there's so much more involved in order to make it a solid build. That's probably not a good idea. That's kind of opening Pandora's box. You know, just too many other things. That have to be considered before doing it. That's just, I just don't think it's I don't think it's a smart move. I think you need to either leave it to the guy who's got the stuff, or just run them stock, because they're a great running saw. I hope I didn't ruin anyone's day. That's my conclusion. Talk to you later. Bye for now.